All right, so today I want to talk about age verification and operating systems. Specifically, I'm going to focus on some of the recent laws. I know there are some in California, I believe Colorado, also Brazil. I'm going to talk about System D specifically. That's kind of what sparked this, but I'm going to let you know right now, yes, I'm going to dive into some of the specifics of System D, but that's not the most important thing here. I'm going to talk about operating systems in general, open source operating systems, Linux, and other Unix and Unix-like operating systems, and just kind of do a little bit of a deep dive and give you guys my thoughts. I've had people ask me like, Dave, you're going to talk about this? And I didn't really plan on it, but I'm just kind of looking into some of the stuff and I'm getting a lot of comments. So yeah, let's talk about it. Let's do that today. All right, so I'm going to focus specifically on the System D stuff first, get this out of the way, then I can talk more generically about this as a whole and more abstractly, because that's stuff I'm really more interested in. But as you may or may not know, System D is, well, in my mind, System D is an init system for Linux, but it has since grown to be way more than that. It's a whole suite of tools. It is almost like a mini operating system unto itself. It sits on top of the Linux kernel. I think it's specific to Linux. It requires a lot of Linuxisms. I'd have to fact check a bunch of this stuff. I know it's been around for a long time, but it is a whole like init system, and it does a lot more than that. It has like Resolve D, it has its own user database stuff. And I'm going to be honest, I had to look into it a little bit to make this video because I don't really use it. If you guys know me, you know my servers are on Illumos, which is a fork of OpenSolaris. You know that I'm recording this on my Mac. My laptop is a Mac. I have a Windows computer, but I just use that for playing games. If I do run Linux, it's virtualized void Linux. So it doesn't even use System D. The only System D that might be running in my house is that little magic mirror back there that's running on a Raspberry Pi. And I think it's got System D. I don't even know. So I really don't interface with it much. That's kind of important here. I'm just letting you know. I'm going to dive through this, but then I'm going to show that in many ways I might not be the person to really dive specifically into this. But let's go into it. Let's see what we got here. So here's the pull request that everyone's talking about. It was 3 weeks ago. This code has been merged. The pull request is closed. Obviously, don't go here, don't comment on it, and you can't even do that anyways. And then we have another pull request that I'll go over later. But for now, we can take a look at this. So we have Dylan Taylor over here added this change: store the user's birth date for age verification as required by recent laws in California, Colorado, and Brazil. So what this does, the XDG desktop portal project is adding an age verification portal, and they link to it here, that needs a data source for the user's age. UserDB already stores personal metadata, email address, real name, location, so birth date is a natural fit. And then this goes to talk about just sort of like the technicals and specifics of it, how they're storing the data. So this has, I had to do some digging into this, but you have System D, which seems to have a UserDB thing, which allows you to store user records as like JSON objects, and it can kind of coalesce. It seems like a different set of sources of truth. So in my world, I have an Etsy password file. That's what I'm used to having. But it seems like in the System D world, you have more of a dynamic system. I can create actual dynamic users or users that have like a temporary GID and only exist for the duration of something. I don't know. It's its own little ecosystem. Like I said, I don't know it very well. So I'm just going to tell you right off the bat, I'm super biased. When I started looking through this, I was like, yeah, they already store your email and your real name and your location. Like, who cares if birth date is another thing that they're storing in their JSON database that they care about? Because I am so far disconnected from that world. Again, I'm just going to harp on this bias. I'm just letting people know. And people are like, Dave, I want to know your thoughts. Listen, I don't think you want to know my thoughts about the System D thing, because my thoughts are it's its own project. I don't interface with it, so I don't really care what they're doing over there. They can do whatever they want to do over there. I'm more interested in the laws and the philosophy behind it. But I'm just going to keep saying that. So let's stop saying that. Let's just dive in here. So they have this change. All it basically does is add a new field to this thing that already has a whole bunch of different fields. So it has a whole birth date field. There's a lot of discussion that goes on here with the technicals, and people get a little bit heated because it's a touchy subject. It has to do with the age verification. It wasn't just, hey, let's add the birth year to this. It was, hey, this is in direct response. It's in the description of this that it has to do with the recent laws for California, Colorado, and Brazil. Now, this change was merged, it's put in here, it was reviewed, and that's it. It's in there now. So the user DBs in System D will now also have a birth date field. So that's where we are. A different user came up with this change to revert it. They made a pull request to revert it. And Leonard down here commented, it's the creator of System D. It's an optional field in the user DB JSON object. It's not a policy engine, not an API for apps. We just define the field so that it's standardized if and only if people want to store the date there, but it's entirely optional. Hence, please move your discussion elsewhere. You are misunderstanding what System D does here. It enforces zero policy. It leaves that up for other parts of the system. And sorry, I'm not really interested in these discussions here. It's not the right place for this. And please don't bring it here. Thank you. And then he closes this issue. I'm fine with this. I think this is totally legitimate. Like, this is a really good response in my mind. Now, here's the thing. If you're wondering, like, wait, Dave, you're for this? No. We can actually talk about the laws and stuff specifically after this. But in terms of this is GitHub and they're talking about technical changes and someone just wanted to revert a technical change based on their own philosophical reasoning here, it's not bad to me that the creator comes in and says, hey, I'm just not doing this, and then unilaterally decides it. Like, I actually don't have a problem with that. It sounds like I'm being sarcastic. I'm not. I don't have a problem with this. But I think there's more to it than this. I mean, take a look at this. System D locked as too heated and limited conversations to collaborators. Yeah, I think that's totally legit. I think these discussions will be worth having, but not necessarily on the GitHub technical website. Like, this would be like for a mailing list or something like that. So for people who wanted to know my opinion of this, it's kind of boring. In my mind, I don't use system D based Linux operating systems. If I have to use Linux, I use ones that don't have system D, and I really don't use Linux that much. I know that confuses some people. They look at me like, oh yeah, Dave's the Linux guy. He's a Linux wizard. I talk about Bash, and I typically use Bash on my Mac. I like a lot of the Unixes. I have some free BSD machines, so I just don't interface with Linux much. Not because I hate it. I just don't deal with it. I'm not really in that world. And when I do use Linux, it's not the system D variant of it. So I really don't touch it much. So that's why when I look at this, someone's saying, Dave, look into the specifics of a system D technical decision. And I'm like, I don't care. They were already doing their own thing. What's another field in a database that isn't Etsy password to control users on Linux? That sounds like I'm giving a value judgment there. I guess maybe I am slightly negative, but like, it's just not for me. It's not the piece of software that I am interested in using. It's a whole init system that has grown and just gotten a lot of features. It has like its own resolver and its own, I could make a whole video on what I feel about system D, but I don't feel the need to because I'm just not interested in it. I just don't use it. It doesn't come up. However, having said all that, I do want to talk about the age verification stuff because that is important to me. And we can talk about the system D stuff tangentially to that, but the main focus for me is the age verification stuff. So you have these laws that are coming out. So AB 1043, Colorado has their own and Brazil has their own. So here we are, light mode jump scare. California legislative information, here we go. So we have Assembly Bill 1043, software applications and online services. Existing law generally provides protections for minors on the internet, including the California Age Appropriate Design Code Act that, among other things, requires a business that provides an online service, product, or feature likely to be accessed by children to do certain things, including estimate the age of child users within a reasonable level of certainty appropriate to the risks that arise from the data management practices of the business, or apply the privacy and data protections afforded to children of all consumers, and prohibits an online service, product, or feature from, among other things, using dark patterns to lead or encourage children to provide personal information beyond what is reasonably expected to provide that online service, product, or feature, or to forego privacy protections. This is a mouthful. Obviously, if you've read the legalese, like, yeah, this is just how it's written. It's written in a way to kind of protect yourself. It's very... If you look at it from a 1,000-foot view, you'd be like, wow, that's surprisingly specific. And if you dig into it, you're like, wow, that's surprisingly vague. It's not a value judgment. I just know why it's written like this. If you've ever studied any sort of law, you know that, oh boy, you get real deep into the weeds here. But that's a good thing. That's why I have this pulled up here. That's why this is the important stuff. This is the stuff that I find interesting. This bill, beginning January 1st, 2027, so at the time of this recording, this is March 22nd, 2026, so we're still about 9 months away. This bill would require, among other things related to age verification with respect to software applications, an operating system provider, as defined, to provide an accessible interface at account setup that requires an account holder, as defined, to indicate the birth date, age, or both of the user that the device for the purpose of providing a signal regarding the user's age bracket to applications available in a covered application store, and to provide a developer, as defined, who has requested a signal with respect to a particular user with a digital signal via a reasonably consistent real-time application programming interface regarding whether a user is in any of several age brackets as prescribed. This bill would require a developer to request a signal with respect to a particular user from an operating system provider or a covered application store when the application is downloaded and launched. That is an incredible mouthful. I can give you my interpretation of it. I am not a lawyer. I can't guarantee that any of this is right. I also think it's a little bit vague here, but basically it seems like we want some sort of way, if I'm like an application and you're going through a store to download me on a computer, I need to be able to ask the App Store. I'm the application of this. I need to be able to ask the App Store or the operating system, hey, is this user in an allowable age bracket? Like I have an 18 plus app. I am an 18 plus app. They can't download me if they're not. So, hey, operating system, is this user allowed to download this app? Give me their age bracket. It's not a Boolean yes or no. It sounds like it's, oh yeah, what's the age bracket of this user? Oh, they're 13 through 16? Nope. Can't have it. That's how I'm interpreting this. But again, I'm not sure exactly if this is what they mean. This bill would prohibit an operating system provider or a covered application store from using data collected from a third party in an anti-competitive manner as specified. The bill would punish non-compliance with a civil penalty to be enforced by the Attorney General as prescribed. The bill would declare its provisions to be severable. So they go on to define a lot of the stuff down here. You can see like account holder means an individual who's at least 18 years of age or a parent or legal guardian. So the 18 years of age in the state. We have age bracket data. So it looks like they define the brackets here. 13 or younger, 13 to 16. Sorry, no, let me be specific. They're under 13. They're at least 13, but under 16. They're at least 16, but under 18, or they're at least 18. So it seems like there are 4 brackets here. So you kind of have like, you know, child, preteen, teen, and adult. See, no point in making names, just actually spell them out like this. This is a better way of doing it. So then it defines what an application is, what a child is. So a child would be these 3 age groups, it looks like. So what I'm interested in is where they define operating system, because that's what I want to know. They're talking about all the different brackets here, but I want to know what this signal is and what they consider an operating system to be. I can't find a good definition of operating system. It always seems to be the operating system provider. Then it mentions at one point an operating system, and then it also wants an application programming interface. I think that's what they call it, API, basically. I just don't remember the words they used exactly. Here's my issue with it. I hate this light mode. Let's pop open that reader. So here we go. This is probably the part of the video you wanted. This is where I'm actually going to get into my thoughts on this. I don't think this is a good thing. I think this is a bad thing because it is too vague as written. Now, that doesn't mean if we tighten up the wording here, I am suddenly going to support it because it stops being vague. That is one of the reasons I don't like it. I also don't like this if I interpret it to mean what I think it means. So if I were to give the best faith interpretation of this, it would be that the operating system records when a user account is created. Now, okay, if I'm IT at a company and I'm setting up 30 machines, am I the person, or is it the person's user account that's going to log into the machine? Who's actually responsible? I don't know, but I'm sure that's something that the courts figure out and someone gets fined for. I'm being needlessly snarky here. Let me actually lock in and be more professional about this. So from what I'm understanding, the best faith interpretation of this is that the operating system would have to record a user's birthday. So you could calculate their age bracket, which you could then give to programs or websites or services. So if I buy a Windows computer, when I create an account, I don't know if this is when the machine is set up by IT, if I'm at a company or I'm buying it. Let's assume the simple case. I buy a laptop, I'm setting up my account. One of the things they ask for is a birthday. Do I have to put it in? Is this bill just that the operating system asked for it? Am I allowed to waive this? Am I allowed to not say it? In that case, am I assumed to be a child? It's kind of the way that Discord did their age verification. If you remember, I did a video where I talked about that sort of thing, where you're kind of assumed child until proven adult, which means let's just lump you with the children. That's its own thing. I'm sure there are ways to deal with that. My point is, I just don't like this. I don't like a law or a bill that stands between me and my computer that I am purchasing that I will own. Yes, my computer runs an operating system, and that operating system is software. We're going to talk about what that actually means, because the definition of an operating system is completely blurred here, and that's part of it. I really want to go down that rabbit hole. But I don't like something getting between me and my computer and saying what kind of personally identifying information, what kind of PII that my computer has to collect on me. Now, the computer can ask these questions. If I install Windows and it's like, hey, what's your name? Like, okay, I can say Bob or whatever. Like, it asks your location. I can say, I don't really want to do this. Apple asks, like, are you okay if we send this information anonymized back to our servers? You can say no. You can request do not track and stuff like that. So what I wonder is, when they ask for your birthday, do you have to give an answer? And if you don't give an answer, are you going to be locked out of certain services? And what are those services I'm locked out of? Because if it's like Apple's App Store that Apple is locking me out of because I didn't sign up with an Apple account, I'm okay with that. Really, I'm okay with that. If Windows locks me out of a Windows service because I didn't give Windows the information that Windows wants, yeah, I understand that. If I'm using open source software where I can go download a package from a package manager, because you've seen some of the software out there, you curl it and then you pipe bash. Is that what's going to lock me out? Am I going to be locked out of that? Just realized I wasn't using the big camera. We can use the big camera for this. Let's get cozy here. Yeah, so my question is like, what thing is actually locking me out? Because in this example, we're talking about like app stores, right? Like Apple's App Store, like Windows, whatever they have. On Linux, what do I have? Is apt going to start asking me? Void has XBPS. Is that going to ask me? What about if I install the Rust programming language? Okay, that's curl pipe shell. Like, whose responsibility is it to ask if I'm allowed to curl pipe shell on my computer that I paid with my money? This is my biggest issue with it. If you've watched my content before, you know, one of the biggest things I say when learning is that you might make mistakes, you know, run commands and you might break stuff, but that's okay. It's your computer that you paid for and you're allowed to do that. So my thought is it's my computer. I should be able to run it whatever I want. Of course, I don't want kids being able to access things they're not supposed to access. I do not want that to happen. Now, the question is, how do we stop that from happening? We can talk about, you know, parental locks and people parenting their children. I don't say that in a disparaging or negative way. Like, people should really be parenting their children. But at a certain level, yes, like, because the alternative is a bill that mandates how everyone must act. And that is no good for anyone. My main issues with this is that I don't like anything standing between me and some hardware that I choose to run software on. If we're going to reduce it down to that, that's what it comes down to. Because the next thing I can think of is, what is an operating system? Right? I talk about it on this channel all the time. In fact, because I'm used to like using Illumos or even some free BSD out there, like in my mind, the operating system is the kernel and some tools that ship with it. Whereas I have to switch gears when I go over to the Linux world because Linux has a kernel. And then you have to put a user land set of tools on top of that and maybe a distribution on top of that. If you go look at the Illumos kernel source code, it's in the same repository that has like ls and stat and other commands like that. It's all grouped in one. So on my brain, I'm like, yeah, it's the operating system. I look at Linux, and I'm like, well, that's the operating system. Well, what specifically is? Well, the kernel, I guess, and it needs an init system, and then maybe some user land tools or else you can't really use it. But like, I guess the kernel's the operating system. Maybe. So does that mean the age verification goes in etc password? Well, in this case, it goes in systemd. Well, what's systemd? The system daemon? I don't even know if it stands for that. I'm that's me assuming it does, but I don't think it does. Or maybe it doesn't anymore. I don't know. You guys can correct me in the comments. But my point is, like, systemd was originally an init system, but now it does a lot more. Is that where age verification lives? Well, that PR wasn't exactly for age verification. It was just to add a birthday field to the JSON object for the users. But the PR was created because of these age verification laws. So where is it supposed to live? What actually is the operating system? And this isn't new, right? Because I'm reducing a computer. I'm being reductionist here on purpose. I'm reducing it down. I'm reducing a computer down to its constituent parts to say, you know, where is the actual operating system? Because I see a bunch of zeros and ones on a hard drive, and I see a CPU doing a bunch of calculations and a bunch of RAM holding data for those calculations eventually. Like, obviously, I know I'm being absurd, but there's a reason I'm doing it, because we're no stranger to this. In the US, you know, we have our amazing amendments. We have our First Amendment. We also have our Second Amendment, right? And bear with me here. Bear with me. Bear arms, bear with me, bear arm. There's a joke here somewhere. The reason I bring it up is because think about like a 3D printer, right? I can print like a little thing for my can. I can print like a little case for my phone. I can also print a firearm. Okay, to a 3D printer, it's just putting plastic in certain specific areas. It's no different. But to a human that's holding this thing, it's a way different experience holding a phone case versus holding a firearm that you've printed, right? The reason I bring this up is because, well, what actually is a firearm? It may sound like I'm being pedantic the same way I was being pedantic about an operating system, but there's a reason for this. We have all this law around it. Because if someone were to say, well, you can't 3D print a firearm, it's like, okay, well, can I print the barrel? Can I print a magazine? What if the capacity is low enough on the magazine? Can I print a grip for it? Well, maybe this grip's illegal. What if I have my hand like this? Well, suddenly now that grip's okay in certain states. Can I print the lower receiver? Oh, wait, hold on. Maybe that actually is the thing that we're worried about. Maybe that's where we put the serial number on it. Maybe that's the thing that you can't do, but everything else is totally fine. The reason I'm using that analogy is because what actually is the operating system? Is it the kernel? Well, then, like, I don't need age verification in systemd. I don't need it in a init system. I don't need it in a core user land tools. But is it more than just the kernel? Is the kernel just the abstraction between the hardware and the software? Because what is that? What part of the kernel means that it has to do age verification? Is it the drivers to the network card? Is it the ability to talk to virtual memory? Is it the thing that maps virtual? Like, what part of it is the thing that makes it the kernel? There are projects out there that add sort of basic input and output to like old computers. Like, think about Commodore 64. the NES, the Apple IIe. Every example is 6502 assembly. But my point is, like, there are operating systems for that. FreeDOS, do these have to have age verification too? I know it sounds like I'm being absurd, but when we're talking about law, some of these specific examples become absurd. You really have to think about it this way. Like, what is actually responsible for it? Who's responsible for this? If some kid makes some hobby operating system and puts it out there on a mailing list and is like, hey guys, I just made Linux too. Are they going to have to put age verification in it? Because I mean, like, that's how the original Linux was made. The thing is, I just don't know. And I think it's too amorphous to really, I'm trying to think about how to say this. I think the thing is too vague and too amorphous to meaningfully be enforceable, really. Like, I can almost understand it if you have a closed source operating system, but it seems like open source might be some sort of exemption to this. Not saying that that's what I want. What I would want is this law to just not exist. There should not be age verification. My operating system should not have to pull personal identifying information from me, from the user. But this is a broader issue. Like, of course it's a broader issue, because I also think that I should be able to install software on my phone, whether it's, Apple, Android, whatever. People are like, well, you shouldn't be able to sideload apps. It's like, okay, sideload? Is that the new, like, jaywalking? Do you mean walk? Do you mean install apps? Like, when I hear sideload, I'm like, hold on, it's my hardware. I paid for it. I can't put an application on it. If I write software and I run it, I have to actually go pay someone to sign a certificate to run on my own device. Like, at what point am I just leasing this thing that I bought? This is not new. Again, none of this stuff is new, but if we don't have these discussions and figure things out soon, we're going to keep pushing the line further and further to software having age verification and beyond. And this is the last thing I kind of want to talk about, is the beyond part, because that scares me. Look at the laws that were referenced in the pull request. It talked about Colorado, California, Brazil. These are pretty big places. What if it was a smaller place? At what point does it become where the place is big enough, so we better make a change based on what they want because we care about their compliance or something like that? So my example is, like, if it's a super weird example, but if, like, I had a couple friends and we went and started our own place, like we got an island called Daveland or whatever. Maybe using an island as an example isn't the best with all the files going around. Imagine we got our own country, right? I have Daveland. There's like 100 people in it. And we were like, you know what? We actually want to do age verification. Is that enough to push an open source software to make a change based on what we want? Probably not. But California is. So my point is, there's some line that exists between Daveland, a very small place I just imagined, and California, where that line's enough where open source software starts making changes based on it. I don't know where the line is. I don't propose to know where that line is. I have no idea. My point is, there is a line. It's somewhere between the two. So let me show you another line, because age verification is one of it, right? What if I wanted to know more about a user? What if I want to know, I don't know, their music preferences? Okay, it's harmless. What if I want to know their favorite color? That's awesome. What if I want to know their religious affiliations? What if I want to know their race? What if I want to know their ethnicity? So at some point, age verification, your birthday, that's fine. Just like, somewhere between California and Daveland, somewhere between age verification being fine and wanting to know someone's ethnicity, where we're like, hold on, we shouldn't be asking that. There's a line there. What is that line? Religious affiliation? Is that somewhere on the line? I don't think any of this is a good thing. Let me reiterate that. I don't think any of that is a good thing. My point is, what happens when that line starts shifting in a bad direction? That's what I start worrying about. So yeah, if it wasn't obvious by the way I talk about hardware and software and how I believe you should own your devices, not have to rent everything that you have, and you've probably heard me complain about monthly subscriptions, not a big fan of them. Hopefully it was obvious how I felt about all this stuff. These are my thoughts. They were originally because of the System D stuff, but obviously I didn't need to spend much time talking about that. I'm more interested in the abstract and the philosophy behind the laws and stuff. So yeah, I don't know. Hopefully you guys found that interesting. It was a little bit of a yap session, but I'm against this stuff. I worry about this stuff. I do not like the direction things are going. I do not want things between me and really anything that I own. Okay, I am one of those guys. If I buy a computer, I should be able to do whatever I want on it. Like, oh, you have to have this kind of birthday. Like, in my brain, I'm like, I have to have the right zeros and ones on my hard drive in a field that got abstracted into a user thing. Like, I don't know, man. It's just like, dude, it's my computer. Let me do whatever I want. At the same time, think of the children. Obviously, I know I don't want them to be able to access bad stuff that they're not supposed to, but there needs to be some sort of way to save children but at the same time, not completely collect as much information as we can about private citizens. There's got to be somewhere where we can meet in the middle when it comes to that. Those are my thoughts on it. So yeah, if you made it this far, let me know what you guys think in the comments. I'm curious to see what people think. I have a rough idea that I think a lot of people in my audience are going to be against it. I've probably never stated explicitly, so it's probably refreshing for some of you to hear that. But yeah, shout out to my patrons over at Patreon. Thank you so much for your continued support. That is so awesome. And yeah, if you want to get your name at the end of one of my videos, go check out the Patreon. Look at this, got a link right here on my screen, so it's really hard for you to click out. There's got to be a better way to do this. So yeah, that's all I got. Thank you, everyone. See ya.